What if you found yourself alone in a secluded cabin, miles away from civilization, only to realize that the silence you sought was the very thing that would haunt you? In the dead of night, a mysterious noise leads you to a room where the shadows conceal something far worse than you could ever imagine. As the walls close in and the unthinkable happens, you'll be left wondering, will you make it out alive, or will the forest claim you as its next victim? Stay tuned, the horror is just beginning. The sky was dark, almost too dark, as if something was hiding behind the clouds. It was the perfect night for something sinister. And in that remote cabin deep in the woods, Zendaya had no idea that the night she had chosen to stay there would be one she'd never forget. She had arrived earlier, seeking solace from her busy life, drawn to a peaceful retreat promised by an old travel magazine. But now, standing at the cabin door, Zendaya couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The air was unnaturally still. Not a rustle of leaves, not even the sound of crickets. She dismissed it as isolation playing tricks on her mind, pushed open the door, and stepped inside. The cabin was quaint, though aged, with a creaking wooden floor and a fireplace unused for years. Despite its faded charm, there was an unsettling energy in the air. After unpacking, Zendaya started preparing a meal, but the silence was overwhelming. Suddenly, a strange noise echoed from upstairs, a thud followed by a dragging sound. It wasn't the house settling. It was something else. Her breath caught in her throat. The silence that followed felt more menacing, as if something were waiting for her to make the next move. Fear crept up her spine, but she shook it off.
She had to check.
She slowly climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. The wood creaked under her feet, amplifying the tension. At the top, she paused, straining to hear. Another thud, followed by a soft moan. The sound was coming from the room at the end of the hallway. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling from within. She walked toward it, her heart hammering in her chest. She reached for the door and, to her shock, it swung open on its own. Inside, the room was frigid, much colder than the rest of the cabin. The weak flickering light illuminated a figure hunched in the far corner, facing away from her. At first, Zendaya thought it was a trick of the light, but as her eyes adjusted, she realized it was something far more sinister. The figure was pale and gaunt, sitting motionless. Its hair was matted, its clothes torn, and it seemed to be whispering something, though Zendaya couldn't make out the words. Panic surged through her, but her legs felt frozen in place. "Help me," the figure whispered. The realization hit her like a punch. This wasn't a person. It was something else, something not quite human. The figure slowly turned, revealing a face that was unnaturally pale, eyes wide and unblinking, its smile twisted into something grotesque. Before she could react, the door slammed shut behind her. The lights flickered out, plunging the room into darkness. She could hear the figure moving toward her, dragging its body across the floor. Zendaya stumbled backward, but the door wouldn't budge. The air was thick with suffocating energy. Then a sound, a low growl, almost inhuman, came from the other side of the room. Zendaya spun around, and from the shadows, emerged another figure. It was taller, its body long and twisted. It moved with jerky, unnatural motions. Its eyes glowed in the dark, and its mouth stretched into an eerie grin. The two figures advanced on her. Zendaya screamed, but the air around her felt thick, choking her scream before it could escape. She ran for the window, but the creatures were too fast, too close. In that moment, Zendaya realized the cabin wasn't haunted by ghosts of the past. It was a place that trapped the living, feeding on their fear, ensuring they never left. She turned toward the door once more, and this time it opened easily, as though granting her way out. But when she stepped outside, the world had changed. The forest was no longer quiet. It was alive, pulsing with an eerie energy. The trees loomed taller, and the shadows seemed to stretch endlessly. Zendaya could feel them watching her, the creatures now part of the forest, waiting for the next soul to claim. The question wasn't whether she could escape, it was whether she could survive.